Good afternoon, everyone. We would now like to begin the TICAD8 official side event, Managing African Soil for Food Security and Environmental Sustainability, Opportunities and Challenges of Agronomy to Solve Low Fertility Nutrient Bottlenecks, which is hosted by the Japan International Research Center for Agricultural Sciences, JIRCAS, in cooperation with the Japan Science and Technology Agency, JST, and the Japan International Cooperation Agency, JICA. We warmly welcome you today. To begin with, please warmly welcome the representatives giving you today's opening remarks. Mr. KOYAMA Osamu, President of JIRCAS, will give his opening remarks on behalf of the organizer of this event. Mr. KOYAMA, please.
Distinguished participants, good evening, afternoon, and morning. It's my great honor to welcome the audience to the TICAD8 official side event, Managing African Soil for Food Security and Environmental Sustainability, Opportunities and Challenges of Agronomy to Solve Low Fertility Nutrient Bottlenecks. This event is hosted by Japan International Research Center for Agricultural Sciences, JIRCAS, my institute, with the auspices of the Japan Science and Technology Agency, JIRCAS, JST, and Japan International Cooperation Agency, JICA. A vibrant, sustainable, and resilient agriculture sector should play a role in driving equitable and sustainable economic development in Africa by providing nutritious food as well as income opportunities to the region's population, the youngest and fast growing in the world. In turn, the region's agricultural productivity growth has been modest in comparison to other developing countries in the world. Africa's heterogeneous yet generally low fertility soil, often poor in essential nutrients, has been the major bottleneck for the productivity growth, constraining the region's full agricultural potentials. In order to boost food production, Africa needs to increase the application of fertilizer, currently at 1/10 of world average and less than half of the regional target. At the same time, while in the other parts of the world, the resource-intensive agriculture with inefficient and excessive use of external inputs has been responsible for overstepping the planetary boundaries. Africa should explore alternative directions, in other words, more regenerative circular pathways. Agronomy should play a key role in developing and delivering science, technology, and innovation to solve soil bottlenecks and thus to unlock Africa's agricultural development potentials. At JIRCAS, we and our partners are committed to technology development to address soil fertility and nutrient management in Africa through our long-term engagement in international multidisciplinary collaborative research, including our 2 SATREPS project in Madagascar and Burkina Faso. About SATREPS, Dr. NAGAMINE will explain in his welcome research just after my opening speech. Today, we are privileged to have distinguished speakers and the chair representing research, academic, business, and development organizations engaged in advancing soil fertility management technologies in Africa. On behalf of the organizer, I would like to extend my sincere appreciation to all, including Dr. Vanlauwe of International Institute of Tropical Agriculture, IITA, Professor Funakawa of University of Kyoto, Mr. Wada of Toyota Tsusho Corporation, Dr. Kabiri of Sasakawa Africa Association, Professor Masuda of University of Tsukuba, along with JIRCAS researchers, Dr. Nakashima, Dr. Tsujimoto, and Dr. Nagumo. I would also like to extend my special gratitude to Dr. Nagamine and Dr. ASANUMA for joining me to open this event. This TICAD8 was indeed held at a particularly critical moment when the global community is facing the triple crisis of food, fuel, and fertilizer, essentials for securing food and nutrition security. I sincerely hope that this side event will provide a timely opportunity for stakeholders to discuss how not only to overcome the current crisis, but also to build a more resilient agriculture sector for Africa. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mr. Koyama. Next, Dr. Nagamine Tsukasa, former Vice President of National Agriculture and Food Research Organization, NARO, will make his welcome remarks. His current post is Research Supervisor of SATREP's program, JST. Dr. Nagamine, please.
Thank you, Chair. Can you hear my voice?
Yes, we can.
Okay. Ladies and gentlemen, distinguished guests, on behalf of Japan Science and Technology Agency, JST, it is my great pleasure to extend opening remarks at the event. My name is Tsukasa Nagamine, Research Supervisor of the Bioresource Group in Science and Technology Partnership for Sustainable Development, SATREPS of JST. First of all, let me introduce about SATREPS briefly. SATREPS has three aims, namely, number one, enhancing international cooperation in science and technology between counterpart country and Japan. Number two, addressing global scale issues such as global warming and advancing science and technology. Number three, capacity development on sustainable research systems, researchers, and networking between researchers. SATREPS is an international research program invested by JST and JICA of Japan jointly. JST is under the supervision of Ministry of Education, Culture, Sports, Science, and Technology. JICA is supervised by the Ministry of Foreign Affairs. JST supports Japanese research institutions using competitive research funds in Japan. On the other hand, JICA supports counterpart research institutions using technical cooperation scheme in Official Development Assistance, ODA. In terms of soil fertility and management of the low fertility soil program in African countries, two SATREPS projects have been started in Madagascar and Burkina Faso, respectively from 2016 by the leadership of Japan International Research Center for Agricultural Science, JIRCAS. I would like to appreciate principal investigators, relevant researchers, JIRCAS and JICA for their kind understandings and cooperation to conduct those projects. Today, I am very glad to hear excellent results on research and development accomplished by the project in this event. I strongly hope that technology based on novel findings will be used for agricultural land and contributed for the next generation in African countries. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you very much, Dr. Nagamine. Next, Dr. Asanuma Shuichi, Special Advisor of the Economic Development Department, JICA, will make his welcome remarks. He was also a research supervisor of SATREP's program, JST.
Well, thank you very much. Distinguished guests and dear participants, good morning and good evening. It is my great honor on behalf of the Japan International Cooperation Agency, JICA, to give the welcome remarks on the occasion of the TICAD8 official side event on managing African soil for food security and environmental sustainability, which is organized by the Japan International Research Center for Agricultural Sciences, JIRCAS. It is widely known that agriculture production is mostly dependent on the soil fertility and environmental conditions. The production of agricultural crops can greatly improved by proper application of fertilizers, both in organic and inorganic forms of plant nutrients, such as manure and compost, or nitrogen, phosphorus, or potassium, and other essential mineral nutrients. One of the major challenges of agriculture in Africa is the low soil fertility, which is becoming much more serious year after year due to the impact of ecosystem degradation and climate change. If I take an example of rice production in some sub-Saharan Africa, a present urgent and important issue is how the yield of rice per unit area could be increased. What kind of technology or integrated technologies could be applied properly and within the reach of farmers? I'm sure a combination of adaptive rice variety and adaptive cultivation technology, including soil management using organic and inorganic materials, is a base of such integrated technologies and will be crucial in improving agricultural productivity in Africa. At this side event, we'll learn about the sustainable technologies and strategies for addressing and managing low soil fertility and nutrient bottlenecks in the sub-Saharan Africa, including the innovative agriculture technologies and practices developed by JIRCAS. In addition, we'll also gain some insights on the social implementation aspects and dissemination of technologies for improving agricultural productivity. JICA is the main implementing agency of the Japan Overseas Development Assistance, ODA, and is chartered with assisting economic and social growth in developing countries. As an organization for international cooperation of social implementation of good and appropriate technologies for the developing regions and countries, we really hope to cooperate with research organizations such as JIRCAS to work together or side by side in order to promote the social implementation and dissemination of technologies, particularly in developing countries in Africa. It is a good sign that, in general, research organizations and researchers in particular have recently realized that, in addition to research and technology development, they have an important role to play in the social implementation of the developed technologies and to make sure that smallholder farmers benefit from these technologies. Now, I believe time has come for us to work together in a real sense. I sincerely hope this event, side event, will promote exchange of information and knowledge and mutual discussions towards achieving improved soil health and food security in Africa. Thank you very much. Let's enjoy the side events. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Asanuma. Now we will commence with the keynote lecture. The original speaker of this lecture was Dr. Ntelanya Sanginga, Director General of the International Institute of Tropical Agriculture, IITA. But unfortunately, he's not available today, and in his place, Dr. Bernard Vanlauwe, Director R4D of Central Africa and Natural Resource Management, IITA, kindly sent us a video presentation. He has been working with Integrated Soil Fertility Management, ISFM, in Sub-Saharan Africa for many years. The title of this speech is Opportunities and Challenges of Agronomy to Solve Low Fertility and Nutrient Deficiencies. Here's the video.
Ladies and gentlemen, Dr. Sanginga and myself, we were invited to talk about opportunities and challenges of agronomy to solve low fertility and nutrient deficiencies. We are grateful for that invitation. Now, before going into the actual talk, in IITA, we have been working around the concept of agronomy using various paradigms. In the early 70s, when IITA was founded, a lot of work was done on fertilizer, land clearing, and tillage practices in the context of green revolution approaches. This failed largely in Africa in those days. So a move was made to valley cropping perennials, but there again there were problems with uptake and adoption. A move was made to legumes, herbaceous legumes, and then later on dual-purpose grain legumes, soybean and cowpeas. And it's during that time we actually saw interest and we saw uptake of our agronomy research products. And then from the early 2000s, we reinvested in fertilizer use together with such legumes and other organic inputs and started working around the concept of integrated soil fertility management, which is what we've been doing since. So my talk will be in two pieces. One is a little bit of a reflection on integrated soil fertility management, where we come from, what we have been doing since then, and the second part on future opportunities. Now, in the early 2000s, it was seen that, here in the left, in the pink graph, that actually the food output per capita is actually declining in sub-Saharan Africa. It was also understood that if we want to really increase productivity to solve that challenge, fertilizer would be required. On the right is an example of India, where cereal yield in red is totally correlated with increased use of fertilizer. There's many other evidence, for this particular statement. So in 2006, the Abuja Fertilizer Summit was organized where the African Union members resolved to increase the use of fertilizer to 50 kilograms per hectare by 2015. The Alliance for the Green Revolution in Africa was founded at the same time in response to Kofi Annan's call, who said the time had come for a uniquely African green revolution. Now, at that time, we were invited, we were working with Agra on developing their soil fertility strategy. We phrased it around the concept of agronomic use efficiency. For a number of reasons. Number one, agronomic efficiency, which is defined as increase in yield over unit of nutrients applied, it is directly related to value generated over cost incurred. So making this use efficiency maximum also generates maximum economic benefits. And secondly, of course, maximum agronomic use efficiencies, they reduce or exclude losses to the environment, which is something we don't want, of course. Now, over the years, a lot of work was done on agronomy at IITA and elsewhere in sub-Saharan Africa. And during the time of the formulation of that strategy, we assembled these learnings into 5 principles or management practices, which are indicated here. Number 1, if you apply fertilizer, manage it well. This is an example of the 4 R's. Apply the right type at the right time, at the right rate and place. And apply good agronomic practices. Without good agronomy, your fertilizer will not be used efficiently. And good agronomy includes appropriate planting times, intercropping systems, weed management, populations, and everything else that makes a crop perform well. Third, use good varieties. Without good demand for nutrients, your supply of nutrients will be lost. Fourth, combine fertilizer and organic inputs. Fertilizer, of course, contains nutrients, but healthy soil and good crops require also organic inputs in the form of carbon containing components. And fifth, address local constraints. If you have, for instance, here like in the red areas in Tanzania, soil acidity problems, you need to deal with that before you will get any response, meaningful response to fertilizer. So these are principles, I would say, developed over the last 20 or 30 years of agronomy research in sub-Saharan Africa. But there's one, and we've defined these as integrated soil fertility management. On the left, you see the phrasing, you see the keywords in blue again, and we are often depicting this also in a step diagram, which is basically indicating that as you keep on applying more and more of those principles, the chances that your agronomic efficiency and your yield are going to increase is actually also increasing. Now for Africa, going back to coffee's a non-uniquely African green revolution, there is something we need to consider also. And I will demonstrate this in the next few slides. This is a Google Earth picture from the Brazilian Cerrados. This is a circle with 1 kilometer diameter and containing maize. This is about 79 hectares. Now you could probably say, because of the greenness and the population, which is quite constant over the whole circle, you could say that any recommendation you make for any dot in the circle is very likely relevant for any other space in the circle. So any soil, fertility, nutrient recommendation you make will be applicable to this 80 hectares. Now, if you again look at Google Earth and you take a scene from Sub-Saharan Africa, for instance, Western Kenya, this is what you see. So you see immediately there's a lot of farms here, there's about 80. You see all shades of green and brown. So here you can state confidently that it is very unlikely that any recommendation you make for any spot will be applicable to most other spots in the circle. And this is the result, of course, of this heterogeneity, which is a common feature of many smallholder farming systems. So here agronomy comes with a big challenge. How do you develop site-specific recommendations, but at the same time do that for many thousands of hectares? Because we need to reach scale. The time to work in one village for 10 years and then go to another village to work another 10 years, I think that time has passed. Now, if you look in a little bit more detail, for instance, at one farm, here you see, for instance, a green and a red plot. This is just a demonstration of what you see if you zoom in. The red plot, which you see on the top right, looks like this, and the green plot is also indicated. This shows maize on the same farm, with the same variety, same input, same management, and same weather. So everything is equal, and you can immediately see the differences in performance at that early stage of maize growth. So in our definition, we retain our blue keywords, the principles remain practical, but we had to add another component. We need to be able to develop those principles and adapt them to local conditions. Address that heterogeneity, basically, that I've just explained. Now, until recently, this was very hard to do because the data were not there. There were no efficient ways to apply agronomy research and development at scale in cost-effective ways. One major development in the last 5 to 10 years is that we are actually now having the tools, the data, the remote sensing layers, everything that's needed to develop locally relevant agronomy solutions, but do it at scale, do it for 100,000 hectares more. One of the toolboxes that's been developed over the last 5 to 10 years is the Aquilimo toolbox, which is a digital service to provide tailored agronomy solutions at scale. Now, what does Aquilimo contain? Aquilimo contains a number of components, and it has, what you can see here, all the data, the tools, the analytics, the modeling, all the things you need to generate, manage, and use those data effectively. There is a cloud-based prediction engine and a database assembling all the information, but it also contains interfaces who should enable the translation of R&D results, technical results, into ways that are accessible either directly to farmers or to extension agents interacting with farmers. And here we talk about the new digital tools. You can see some examples here, SMS, USSD, and so on. Smartphone applications, but we are still working with the printable guides and maps too. So this platform, which has been, as I said, developed over the last 5 to 10 years, is really allowing us now to be locally relevant, but at scale for many thousands of farmers in specific cropping systems and areas. So this is where we are with integrated soil fertility management. Now I'm going to reflect on a few future opportunities. Where do we go? What do we do next? And here, of course, we need to immediately think or focus on the main challenges that are facing smallholder farming communities today. I will go into a number of those and then try to explain how ISFM could be part of the solution to those challenges. Number one, of course, is the very high fertilizer prices, which are, of course, generated by recent events that we all know of. This is, for instance, a graph of price of urea, DAP, and MOP. Over time, you see an enormous increase to the right. And I believe here ISFM remains very relevant because ISFM has at its core maximizing input use efficiencies. Now, I've been asked many times in the last few weeks or months, what are the alternatives for fertilizer? And my short answer always is none. Then, of course, you need to explain that there's issues with the availability of those alternative sources, organic matter, and so on and so on. But since there are no alternatives, maximizing its use efficiency is and remains a very key priority for agronomy and research in sub-Saharan Africa. And all R&D that's currently happening and that is still being reinforced on developing locally relevant soil fertility management at scale remains a priority. This goes into the areas of diagnostics of problems, of generating recommendations, and then, of course, deploying these with many farmers. The second key challenge, of course, is the issue of soil health. We know that for sustainability reasons, it's good to invest in the health of your soil to keep on growing crops efficiently. And we've seen here, this is just one example, where there is a relation between relative annual change in crop productivity and relative annual change in soil organic carbon contents. There is a lot of scatter. There is a lot of uncertainty in this relationship, but there is a relationship. So focusing on increasing crop productivity in efficient ways could be a viable route towards improving soil organic carbon. Of course, soil organic carbon is often equated with soil health, although we know that soil health is usually defined more broadly, but there's of course always the question of indicators and how do you measure and assess. So soil organic carbon will probably remain a key indicator of soil health for the very near future. Now, what we have learned over time in terms of soil carbon and soil health dynamics, number one, there's often talk about these days about carbon stocks, but we really need to talk about carbon sequestration. This is not the same thing. Sequestration is related to carbon stocks remaining in the soil for a relatively longer period of time. Very often the emphasis is on carbon stocks, but if you use organic matter that's easily decomposable, your stocks will increase only for a very short period of time. Second thing we've learned is that there are soils that favor carbon sequestration. It's an option for soils in Africa that have a capacity to stabilize carbon. That includes, of course, clay soils with high oxide contents, but it excludes sandy soils, which are very common in large areas of Africa. Third, African soils, they do have a potential as carbon sinks. The soils that favor sequestration because they don't experience much sediment. Four, towards carbon sequestration are mainly through the application of organic inputs, but the limited availability of such organic inputs is a constraint. If we talk about using external sources, very often we can generate carbon leakage, which is again not solving many problems. Fifth, carbon sequestration is not only related to carbon, it also requires nutrients. Per ton of carbon, 100 kilogram of nitrogen needs to be sequestered. So these are some of the learnings on how, on the potential and of African soils to store carbon, but also there are some of the challenges. So after the efficiency question and the soil health question, the third question, of course, the challenges climate change, which is already affecting a lot of areas on the continent. This is just an example. On the left, you see expected changes in mean annual temperature. Second graph shows the expected changes in shortened wet season. Then we have reduced wet season precipitation, and the right graph basically shows the combination of all those three dynamics, and you see that most of the continent looks orange to dark brown, which means negative to very negative effects of climate change. Now again, in ISFM, what we've seen is that if you have your combined application of fertilizer and organic inputs on grain yield, for instance, we see this always gives the highest yields, more than the individual input of fertilizer and organic matter, and certainly more than no inputs. But we've also seen, if you look at variability over time, we've seen that that region is also often having the lowest variability, meaning the highest stability against variable production conditions, of which climate is one, of course. There's a number of issues remaining here. Which components of ISFM are contributing most meaningfully to which aspects of climate change, and does the full spectrum of ISFM, all those principles, provide a response to a diverse set of climate-related stresses? So these are issues that we are still trying to resolve. The fourth challenge is, of course, how do you bring principles, information, learnings to farmers? I've already shown part of this slide where we have working on tools and interfaces, but there's a number of key questions remaining that need to be addressed. Number one, which local diagnostics are applicable at scale to assist extension agents to provide relevant recommendations? Local diagnostics, I mean, how can we identify which are the main soil fertility and nutrient problems? Or could there be situations where a human intermediary is no longer necessary? Could artificial, digitally enabled tools actually replace human beings at one time or the other? Second, how can information be obtained in time and at scale on the actual performance of ISFM interventions and the drivers affecting this? It's of course good to develop recommendations, do all the work that's necessary to get that meaningful results. But when people then actually start using that information, how do we know how those interventions are performing? Do we really get those economic efficiencies that we had anticipated? Third, how does bundling of services affect the uptake at scale of ISFM? ISFM requires inputs, fertilizer, knowledge, varieties, ways to generate and apply organic resources, which is then often related to the need for credit and market access. So how can we bundle all those services to be sure that our ISFM is actually being taken up at scale? Fourth, at which scale does it make economic sense to develop site and crop-specific input formulations? We probably cannot develop recommendations for every single field farm in Africa. So at which scale does it make most economic sense? These are just some questions we are addressing. There's many more, of course. One thing we've been doing with our Akilimu project, I've already alluded to, Akilimu is trying to bundle services. So not only develop recommendations, but also, being sure we integrate those into partnerships with agro-input suppliers, companies that demand fresh cassava roots, credit providers. So we have all these pieces of the puzzle brought together towards impact. And we believe there's a lot of value in working in such a model. Of course, we've been working with a number of scaling partners to make this happen. Currently, we have over 200 active members. You see some examples here. Development organizations, agro-input suppliers, starch companies, digital advisory companies, and credit providers. And one of our partners, of course, is the Sequestration Association. These are some recent data. We've been working with over 10,000 cassava growers. And most of those farmers, through the use of field days of demonstration fields, have actually used and are continuing to use recommendation generated on cassava production. So all those learnings, all those tools, all those approaches are now being advanced in the context of a new initiative, which we call Excellence in Agronomy for Sustainable Intensification and Climate Adaptation. This is a new initiative of the CGIAR, and we are hoping in the next 5 to 10 years to develop, to progress, and to advance those various opportunities that I've been referring to. Thanks a lot for your attention and certainly for your interest also. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Dr. Bernard Vanlauwe.